The morning sun shone through the window of General Ta Kim's childhood home in Atlanta. He stood in front of the mirror, straightening the medals on his Space Force uniform. 20 years of service had earned him many honors. His fingers paused on the gold star he had received after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, where his quick thinking had saved thousands of lives. Still checking yourself in the mirror like when you were 16, a warm voice called from the doorway. Tay turned to see his sister Ju smiling at him. "Some habits never die," he replied with a laugh. "Mom and Dad would be so proud," Ju said, walking into the room. Their parents had passed away 3 years ago, just months before Tai had been promoted to general. First Korean-American general in the Space Force. They came to this country with nothing but hope. Ta nodded. "I wish they could have seen it." He checked his watch. "I need to head out. The meeting with the defense secretary is at noon. And dinner with me is at 7, Ju reminded him. "Don't be late. I'm making Mom's kimchi jjigae. I wouldn't miss it for the world," Ta promised. It had been 8 months since his last visit to Earth. Life on the Unity station that orbited Mars kept him busy, especially with the ongoing peace talks with the Ardani Collective. Tai chose to drive himself rather than accept the military escort he had been offered. He enjoyed the simple pleasure of being behind the wheel of a car, something he rarely got to do in space. The rental car was nothing special, just a basic blue sedan, but it felt good to drive on real roads again. As he drove through his old neighborhood, Tai was struck by how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The corner store where he had bought candy as a child was now a coffee shop. The park where he had played baseball still had the same rusty backstop. His thoughts drifted to the Ardani Peace Treaty. The aliens had been surprised by humanity's quick adaptation to space travel and military strategy. What had taken other species centuries had taken humans just decades. The first contact war had been brief but brutal, ending when Tai's fleet outmaneuvered the Ardani forces at Proxima Centauri. Now, after 5 years of tense relations, the Ardani had offered peace. They respected strength and clever tactics. In their culture, warriors were held in the highest regard. Ta had earned their respect, and with it, a chance for humanity to join the Galactic Congress. Lost in thought, Ta didn't notice the police car behind him until its lights flashed. He checked his speed. He was going exactly the limit. Perhaps a taillight was out on the rental. He pulled over to the side of the road, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel as his military training had taught him. Officer Dan Reynolds approached the car with his hand resting on his holster. Reynolds had been on the force for 12 years and had received 6 complaints about his treatment of minorities. None had stuck. "License and registration," Reynolds said sharply, not bothering with a greeting. "Good morning, officer," Tay replied calmly. "The car is a rental. I have the papers and my ID right here." He moved his hand slowly toward the glove compartment. Reynolds tensed. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Tay froze, then carefully moved his hands back to the steering wheel. "My ID is in my wallet, in my jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for it very slowly." "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Reynolds asked, ignoring Ta's words. "I grew up here," Tai explained, keeping his voice even. "I'm visiting my sister." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "Sure you are." His gaze flicked to the military uniform. "Where'd you get that costume?" "Halloween's not for months." Ta blinked in surprise. "This isn't a costume, officer. I'm General Ta Kim, United States Space Force." Reynolds laughed. "Right. And I'm the president. Get out of the car. Slowly." Ta complied, moving with careful precision. As he stepped out, the morning sun caught his medals, making them gleam. "Officer, you can check my ID. I'm heading to a meeting with the Secretary of Defense." The dashcam on Reynolds' police car recorded everything. It showed how Tai stood perfectly still, how he made no threatening moves. It showed how Reynolds' hand tightened on his gun when Tay reached, slowly, so slowly, for his wallet. "I said don't move," Reynolds shouted. "I'm just getting my ID, as you requested," Ta said, his voice still calm, but with an edge of concern now. The dashcam caught the next moments in perfect, terrible clarity. Tay's hand moving to his inside pocket, Reynolds drawing his weapon. Ta beginning to say, "Officer, I'm just." 3 shots rang out in quick succession. Ta looked surprised more than anything else. He looked down at his chest, where 3 dark spots bloomed against the blue of his uniform. He took 1 step forward, then fell to his knees. "Officer," he gasped. "Why?" Then General Ta Kim, hero of the Battle of Proxima Centauri, negotiator of the Ardani Peace Treaty, and the pride of his family, collapsed onto the asphalt. Reynolds stood frozen, gun still raised. A passing car slowed, and someone inside started recording on their phone. Reynolds finally lowered his weapon and called for an ambulance, but it was already too late. By the time the paramedics arrived, Ta Kim was gone. The news traveled fast, first across Atlanta, then across the nation, then across the planet, and finally across the stars. Ju Kim was preparing dinner when her phone rang. The voice on the other end was formal, military. She dropped the phone before they finished speaking. She knew, somehow, even before they said the words. On the Unity station orbiting Mars, Han Park, Ta's second-in-command and closest friend, was in the middle of a briefing when an aide whispered in his ear. The room watched as all color drained from his face. "Meeting adjourned," he said hoarsely, and left without another word. Within hours, the video from both the police dashcam and the bystander's phone had spread across every news network and social media platform on Earth and in the colonies. The footage was undeniable. A decorated general, standing calmly, shot while reaching for his ID. The Space Force issued a statement of shock and grief. The president promised a full investigation, but it was the reaction from beyond Earth that no one had anticipated. The Ardani Collective, monitoring Earth communications as part of their ongoing diplomatic relations, requested official confirmation of the incident. When it came, they went silent for 24 hours, breaking all communication with human representatives. When they finally responded, their message was simple: "We request all information regarding this incident. In our culture, warriors are sacred. The taking of a warrior's life without honor or cause is an abomination. We must understand if this represents the true nature of humanity." Officer Reynolds was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. He gave no statement, but his police union representative spoke of split-second decisions and perceived threats. Protests broke out in Atlanta first, then in cities across America, then across Earth. Signs bearing Ta Kim's face and the words, "He served us all," appeared everywhere. Outside the United Nations building in New York, a crowd gathered, growing larger by the hour. In space, human colonies on Mars, Europa, and the Moon held vigils. Military personnel of all ranks and backgrounds stood in silent formation, saluting the memory of a man who had helped secure humanity's place among the stars. Ju Kim sat alone in her kitchen, the uneaten dinner growing cold on the table. On the counter, her phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, officials, friends. She ignored them all. Instead, she stared at a photo on her refrigerator. It showed Ty at his graduation from the Space Force Academy, young and proud in his cadet uniform. Their parents stood on either side of him, beaming with pride. "What happens now, big brother?" she whispered to the empty room. "What happens now?" On Unity Station, Han Park stood at the viewport, looking toward Earth, a small blue dot in the distance. In his hand, he held Ta's letter of recommendation that had helped Park join the Space Force 15 years ago. The Ardani representative had requested a meeting for the following day. They wanted to know if the death of General Kim was an isolated incident or evidence of a deeper problem within human society. The future of the peace treaty, perhaps the future of humanity's place in the galaxy, hung in the balance. Park made a decision then. He would not let his friend's death become the reason for humanity's failure. He would speak to the Ardani himself, honestly, about humanity's struggles and its potential, about what Tai had believed in. As Earth rotated slowly in the distance, the news continued to spread across the stars, rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The incident that had taken one man's life was about to change the course of human history. 3 days after General Ta Kim's death, Han Park stood before the main view screen on Unity Station. The face of Chief Counselor Verix of the Ardani Collective filled the screen. The aliens' crystalline features glittered under the lights of their council chamber. Though Ardani had no eyes in the human sense, Park felt the weight of their attention. "Commander Park," Verix said, their voice translated by the computer into a deep, resonant tone. "Our council has reviewed all available data on the death of General Kim. We find ourselves troubled." Park nodded. "We are all troubled, Chief Counselor. What happened was a tragedy that should never have occurred. In our culture," Verix continued, "warriors who have proven themselves in battle are sacred beings. General Kim earned our respect at Proxima Centauri. He was honorable, even in victory." The alien paused, their crystalline form shifting slightly. "Yet he was killed by one of your own peacekeepers. For no reason we can understand. This contradicts everything we believed about human society." Park took a deep breath. He had been preparing for this conversation since the news broke. The future of human-Ardani relations rested on his next words. "Chief Counselor, I won't make excuses or try to hide the truth. Humans still struggle with darkness in our nature, with fear and prejudice. What happened to General Kim reveals our worst failing, that despite reaching the stars, some of us still judge others by their appearance rather than their character." Verix was silent for a long moment. "This is unexpected honesty, Commander." "Ta would have wanted the truth spoken," Park said simply. "He believed that we can only overcome our flaws by facing them directly. The Council requires time to consider this situation," Verix said finally. "Our treaty discussions will be paused. We will contact you when we have reached a decision." The screen went dark, leaving Park staring at his own reflection. Behind him, Admiral Chen spoke up. "You took a risk being that honest." Park turned. It was the only choice. Lying would have destroyed any chance of salvaging the peace. "The President won't be pleased," Chen warned. "They wanted us to downplay the incident." "With respect, Admiral, that's impossible. The Ardani have been monitoring Earth's communications. They've seen the protests, the news coverage. They know exactly what happened and what it means." Chen nodded slowly. "So what now?" Park looked back at the dark screen. "Now we wait. And hope." On Earth, Ju Kim stood on the steps of Atlanta City Hall. A sea of faces looked up at her. Some held signs with her brother's picture. Others held candles that flickered in the evening breeze. A microphone stood before her. She had never liked public speaking, but today she needed to find her voice. "For Ta, my brother," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "loved the stars since he was a child. He would look up at the night sky and tell me that up there, the things that divided us on Earth wouldn't matter anymore." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Ta believed in humanity's potential. He fought for our place among the stars because he thought we deserved it, that despite our flaws, we could be better. He never lost that faith, even when facing alien enemies who wanted to destroy us. Ju paused, gathering her strength. "The man who killed my brother has shown the worst of what humans can be. But look around you. This gathering, people of all backgrounds standing together, shows the best of who we are. This is what Tay fought for. This is what he believed in." In the back of the crowd, a reporter raised her hand. "Ms. Kim, have you heard about the Ardani Collective's response? They've suspended all diplomatic talks with Earth." A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew what was at stake. The Ardani controlled access to the Galactic Congress and trade routes that could advance human technology by centuries. "I haven't spoken directly with the Ardani," Ju replied. "But I know what my brother would say. He would say that we need to earn our place among the stars by showing that we can overcome our darkest impulses, that we can face our failings and grow beyond them. Another reporter called out, "What about Officer Reynolds? Do you think he should face murder charges?" Ju gripped the podium. "I want justice, not revenge. My brother dedicated his life to protecting others. His legacy should be healing, not more division." As she stepped away from the microphone, the crowd erupted in applause. Ju didn't feel the relief she had hoped for. Her brother was still gone, and the future he had worked for hung in the balance. Officer Dan Reynolds sat alone in his small apartment, blinds drawn against the reporters camped outside. His gun and badge had been taken. His phone buzzed constantly with messages, some supportive, many threatening. On the television, a commentator was saying, "The question on everyone's mind. Was this a tragic mistake or a deliberate act of prejudice?" Reynolds turned off the TV. He knew the answer, though he couldn't admit it even to himself. He had seen the uniform, the medals. He had seen a man of Asian descent in an expensive car in a neighborhood where Reynolds thought he didn't belong. He had made assumptions, deadly ones. His lawyer had told him not to speak to anyone. The police union was standing by him publicly, but privately they were distancing themselves. The video was too clear, the evidence too damning. Reynolds covered his face with his hands. One moment of fear and prejudice had not only taken a life, but might have changed the course of human history. On the moon colony, protesters gathered outside the Earth Embassy. Signs in multiple languages demanded justice for General Kim and prove we deserve the stars. Inside the embassy, diplomats frantically drafted messages to the Ardani, trying to salvage the situation. Nothing they wrote seemed adequate in the face of what had happened. On Mars, the military base where Todd Kim had trained the first space fighters was renamed Kim Base in his honor. Soldiers placed flowers beneath his portrait in the main hall. On Europa, the ice miners paused their work for a moment of silence. Many were veterans who had served under General Kim during the First Contact War. They stood in the artificial gravity of their base, heads bowed, remembering the man who had led them home safely. In the Oval Office, the President of the United States met with her advisors. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. "The Ardani have canceled all scheduled meetings," the Secretary of State reported. "They've recalled their diplomats from the Luna Embassy." "What are our options?" the President asked. The Secretary of Defense shook his head. "Limited. The Ardani hold all the cards here. They control the hyperspace lanes we need for our colony ships. Without their cooperation, we're confined to our solar system." "What do they want?" the President pressed. "They haven't made specific demands," the Secretary of State said. "But reading between the lines of their communications, they want proof that what happened to General Kim isn't who we are as a species." The National Security Advisor spoke up. "Madam President, there's something else. Commander Han Park has requested permission to travel to the Ardani homeworld." The President looked surprised. "For what purpose?" "He wants to address their High Council directly, as General Kim's friend and second in command." "That's completely outside protocol," the Secretary of State objected. "We can't have a military officer conducting diplomacy without oversight." The President was quiet for a moment, thinking, "But that might be exactly what we need. Someone who knew Kim personally, someone the Ardani already respect from the war." "It's a risk," the Defense Secretary warned. "Everything about this situation is a risk," the President replied. "But Park knows the Ardani better than any of our diplomats, and he knew Kim. She made her decision. Grant his request, but make it clear he speaks as Kim's friend, not as an official representative of Earth." Han Park prepared his ship for the journey to the Ardani homeworld. It would take 3 days using the hyperspace lane they had granted him access to. 3 days to prepare what might be the most important speech of his life. As he made final checks on his ship's systems, a message came through. It was from Ju Kim. "Commander Park," she said, her face tired but determined. "My brother trusted you more than anyone. Please tell the Ardani that Tai never lost faith in humanity, even at the end. Tell them that his death should bring change, not conflict." Park nodded solemnly. "I will, Ms. Kim. I promise." As his ship broke orbit from Unity Station, Park looked back at Earth, a small blue marble in the blackness of space, so beautiful from a distance, so complicated up close. The fate of that world, of all human worlds, now rested partly on his shoulders. He had to make the Ardani understand both humanity's flaws and its potential. He had to speak for Tai, for the future his friend had believed in. As the hyperspace drive engaged, sending his ship hurtling between the stars, Park opened a file on his tablet. It contained every speech, every letter, every recorded conversation he could find where Tai had spoken about humanity's place in the galaxy. "Help me, old friend," he whispered to the empty ship. "Help me show them who we really are." The stars streaked by outside his viewport, carrying him toward a moment that would change the course of human history forever. Han Park's ship dropped out of hyperspace near the Ardani homeworld. The planet glowed with a soft purple light, its crystal cities visible even from orbit. It was beautiful in an alien way, all sharp angles and geometric patterns. As his ship approached the main docking station, Park felt his heart race. No human had ever addressed the full Ardani High Council before. Most diplomatic meetings happened with just 1 or 2 council members present. Today, all 12 would hear him speak. His ship landed with a gentle thud. When the airlock opened, 2 tall Ardani guards waited for him. They wore no weapons. Ardani considered their own crystalline bodies to be weapons enough. "Commander Han Park," one guard said, the translation computer changing their musical language into English. "You will follow us to the council chamber." Park nodded and stepped out of his ship. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making him feel bouncy despite his nerves. The walk to the council chamber took 20 minutes. They passed through crystal hallways that sparkled with inner light. Other Ardani stopped to stare at the human visitor. Some made gestures that Park recognized as signs of respect for a warrior. News of his friendship with General Kim had spread. Finally, they reached a massive doorway carved from a single piece of purple crystal. The doors swung open silently, revealing the High Council chamber beyond. 12 crystal thrones arranged in a circle dominated the room. Each throne held an Ardani council member. They were taller than regular Ardani, their crystal bodies more complex and multifaceted. In the center of the circle stood a small platform. "The human will approach the center," announced Chief Counselor Verix. Park walked forward, feeling the weight of 24 crystal eyes, or whatever the Ardani used to see, watching his every move. He stepped onto the platform and looked around at the council members. "Commander Han Park," Verix said, "you have requested this audience against all normal protocols. We have granted it out of respect for General Ta Kim, who proved himself honorable in battle against us and wise in peace. Speak your purpose." Park took a deep breath. This was the moment that could change everything. "Honored Council," he began, "I come before you not as a representative of Earth's governments, but as someone who served alongside General Ta Kim for 15 years. What happened to him reveals humanity's deepest shame, that despite reaching the stars, we still battle the gravity of our prejudices." The council remained silent, their crystal forms catching the light as they listened. "I will not lie to you," Park continued. "The man who killed my friend did so because of the color of his skin. Because despite General Kim's uniform and medals, Officer Reynolds saw him first as different, as someone who didn't belong." A murmur ran through the council, their bodies making soft chiming sounds as they shifted. "This truth shames us," Park said. "It should shame us. But I ask you to consider something important. Would we be having this conversation if we tried to hide this truth? Would we be speaking now if humans were a people who refused to face our darkest flaws?" Chief Counselor Verix leaned forward. "Your point, Commander Park." "My point is this," Park said, his voice growing stronger. "The measure of a species is not found in their moments of perfection, but in how they respond to their failures. After General Kim's death, something happened that I wish you could see with your own eyes. Park touched a small device on his wrist. A hologram appeared in the air above the platform. It showed news footage from Earth, crowds gathering in cities around the world, holding candles and pictures of General Kim. Within days of his death, millions of humans joined together to demand justice and change. Not out of fear of your reaction, but because they recognized a fundamental wrong had been done. Because they believe, as General Kim believed, that we must be better if we are to take our place among the stars. The hologram changed to show the protests at the space colonies, then the vigils held by military personnel. The officer who killed my friend will face justice according to our laws, Park continued. But more importantly, his actions have sparked a movement for real change. Another image appeared, the president signing a document. This is the Kim Initiative, a comprehensive program to address systemic bias within our military and law enforcement. It was created just days after General Kim's death. It will require extensive training, education, and accountability for anyone who serves in a position of authority. Park paused, looking at each council member in turn. General Kim once told me that the Ardeni value truth above all else. So here is the truth. Humanity is flawed. We carry the weight of our history, our prejudices, our fears, but we also carry the seeds of something better. We can look at ourselves honestly and say, this is not good enough. We must change. Park's voice grew quieter, more personal. Ta believed in that better future. He died for it, though not by choice. Now his death has become a catalyst for the very change he worked toward in life. That is the human way, to learn from tragedy, to grow from pain. Park squared his shoulders and looked directly at Chief Counselor Verix. The Ardeni have lived for thousands of years in peace with other species. You have had time to overcome your own early struggles. Humans are young among the stars. We make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. But we learn, we change, we grow. The council chamber was completely silent now. I ask you not to judge humanity by our worst moment, but by how we respond to it, by what we are striving to become. That is what General Ta Kim would have asked of you. Park bowed his head. Thank you for hearing me. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Chief Counselor Verix rose from their throne. The other council members shifted in surprise. This was not normal protocol. Verix stepped down from their raised position and approached the platform where Park stood. The chief counselor was nearly 12 feet tall, towering over the human. In 10,000 years, Verix said, their voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room, the Ardeni have encountered many species, some warlike, some peaceful, some honest, some deceptive. Verix's crystal form bent down, bringing their face level with Park's, a profound gesture of respect in Ardeni culture. But rarely have we witnessed a species capable of such honest self-reflection. Rarer still is a people who can face their own darkness and choose light instead. Park remained still, hardly daring to breathe. Commander Park, Verix continued, your words honor your friend's memory. General Kim saw in humanity what we now begin to see, potential. Not perfection, but the capacity to recognize imperfection and strive beyond it. Verix straightened and turned to address the full council. I propose we not only continue our treaty discussions with humans, but expand them. The Kim Initiative shows promise. We shall offer our assistance in its implementation. Another council member spoke up. Is this wise, Chief Counselor? The humans are still divided among themselves. As were we once, Verix replied. All species begin their journey to the stars carrying the weight of their planetary conflicts. The question is not whether they have overcome all their flaws, but whether they are honestly working to do so. Verix turned back to Park. Commander, you will return to Earth with our decision. The Ardeni Collective will maintain our alliance with humanity. We will share technologies that will help unite your people and advance your development. Park felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, Chief Counselor. Your wisdom honors us all. There is one condition, Verix added. We request permission to establish a cultural exchange program. Ardeni observers will help monitor the implementation of the Kim initiative, and in return, human representatives will be welcomed here to learn our ways. I believe Earth will agree to those terms, Park said. It is a generous offer. Verix made a gesture with their crystalline arms, the Ardani equivalent of a nod. Then it is decided. You may tell your leaders that the path to the stars remains open. Tell them also that General Ta Kim's name will be added to our Hall of Honored Warriors, the first human to receive this recognition. As Park left the council chamber, he felt both exhaustion and hope. The mission had succeeded beyond his expectations. He touched the small photo of Tai he carried in his pocket. We did it, old friend, he whispered. Your death will not be the end of our journey to the stars. It will be a new beginning. As his ship prepared for the return journey to Earth, Park composed messages to Ju Kim and to the president. The news would bring both relief and responsibility. The path forward would not be easy, but it was clear. Humanity had been given a second chance among the stars. Now, they would have to prove they deserved it. 1 year after General Ta Kim's death, Earth looked different. Not in its physical form. The blue oceans and green-brown continents remained the same from space, but in how its people acted, thought, and treated each other, much had changed. The Kim initiative had grown beyond its military origins. Schools taught about prejudice and its dangers. Police departments across the world had adopted new training methods, many guided by Ardani observers whose crystalline forms had become a common sight in major cities. Today was an important day. On the moon, a new building gleamed under Earth's light. The Kim Space Academy stood ready for its opening ceremony. Ju Kim stood before a mirror in her guest quarters at the lunar base, adjusting her formal suit. A year of grief and purpose had changed her. She had left her accounting job to lead the Kim Foundation, which supported programs fighting prejudice and promoting unity. A soft knock sounded at her door. Come in, she called. Han Park entered, wearing his dress uniform with a new insignia, the crossed stars of an admiral. It's time, he said gently. Are you ready? Ju nodded, as ready as I'll ever be. They walked together through the curved hallways of the lunar base. Large windows showed the gray lunar landscape outside, and rising above it, the gleaming structure of the Kim Academy. It's beautiful, Ju said. The Ardani helped design it, Park explained. Their crystal architecture combined with our human needs. It's the first true human-Ardani collaboration. They reached the main airlock and boarded a small transport vehicle. As it carried them across the lunar surface, Ju gazed at the Earth hanging in the black sky. Tai always wanted me to see Earth from space, she said quietly. He said it changes you forever. Park nodded. He was right. From up here, all our divisions seemed so small. The transport stopped at the Academy's main entrance. A large crowd had gathered in the plaza before it. Human dignitaries, military personnel, and towering Ardani visitors. A special atmospheric shield had been erected so everyone could stand in the open without spacesuits. As Ju and Park exited the transport, the crowd parted to create a path. At the end stood the President of the United States and Chief Counselor Verix. Ms. Kim, the President greeted her warmly. Admiral Park, thank you both for everything you've done to make this day possible. Verix's crystal form caught the sunlight, sending rainbow patterns across the plaza. The Ardani people honor your presence, the alien leader said, bowing slightly. Together, they turned to face the crowd. The president stepped forward to a podium. 1 year ago, she began, Earth faced a moment of terrible truth. The death of General Ta Kim forced us to confront our failings, to admit that despite our technological advances, we still struggled with the ancient burden of prejudice. The crowd was silent, listening intently. Today, we open the Kim Space Academy. It will train not just pilots and engineers, but diplomats and peacekeepers. Every graduate will learn not only the skills to navigate space, but to navigate the differences between us, Human and human, human and alien. The president gestured to the Ardani delegation. Our friends from the Ardani Collective have shared technology and wisdom beyond what we could have imagined. Their patience with our young species has given us time to grow. The president turned to Ju. Miss Kim, would you do us the honor of saying a few words? Ju hadn't expected this. She stepped forward nervously, looking out at the sea of faces, human and alien, all watching her. My brother, she began slowly, loved space because he said it offered a fresh start. Up here, we could leave behind old hatreds and fears. We could be defined not by how we looked, but by what we did. She paused, collecting her thoughts. When Todd died, I worried his dream had died with him. I was wrong. His death became a spark that lit something in all of us, a determination to be better, to do better. Ju looked up at the earth hanging in the black sky. Look at what we've accomplished in just 1 year. Crime rates are down. Trust between communities is up. The Kim Initiative has changed how we train our police, our military, our leaders. And now, with the Ardani's help, we're reaching farther into space than ever before. She turned to Chief Counselor Verix. Thank you for seeing beyond our worst moment, for judging us not by our failures, but by our efforts to overcome them. Verix stepped forward, towering over the human woman. The Ardani do not offer friendship lightly, they said, their voice translated smoothly. But we recognize in humans a rare quality, the ability to change, quickly and purposefully. It is why, despite your youth among the stars, we believe you will find your rightful place in the galaxy. The chief counselor made a gesture, and 2 Ardani attendants brought forward a crystal container. Today, we bring a gift. With the permission of your governments, we will place this at the heart of the Academy. The container opened, revealing a small crystal that glowed with inner light. This is a memory crystal, Verix explained. It contains the complete record of General Kim's service, both in war against us and in peace alongside us. It will share his wisdom with generations to come. Ju's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. The ceremony continued with the official ribbon cutting. As the doors to the Academy opened for the first time, a hologram appeared above the entrance. General Ta Kim in his uniform, smiling slightly. The crowd erupted in applause. Later that day, as the formal events ended, Ju found herself standing alone on an observation deck. Earth hung in the blackness before her, beautiful and fragile. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to see a man she didn't immediately recognize. He was older than she remembered, his face lined with stress. Then it clicked. Officer Reynolds, she said quietly. Dan Reynolds stopped, clearly unsure if he should approach further. Miss Kim, he said, his voice rough. I didn't expect to see you alone. I can leave. No, Ju said. Stay. Reynolds moved to stand beside her, keeping a respectful distance. He looked out at Earth. I didn't think I would be allowed to attend, he admitted. After his trial, Reynolds had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. But the judge, impressed by his genuine remorse and willingness to help reform police training, had suspended most of the sentence. Instead, Reynolds now worked with the Kim Initiative, sharing his story as a warning to others. Admiral Park suggested you come, Ju told him. He said your work with the initiative has helped save lives. Reynolds nodded slowly. It doesn't make up for what I did. Nothing could. No, Ju agreed. But Ta believed people could change. He would want his death to mean something. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching Earth turn slowly. The first class of cadets arrives tomorrow, Ju said eventually. You're speaking to them. I hear. Yes, about how fear and prejudice can blind us, about the cost of split-second judgments. Ju turned to look at him directly. Tell them about my brother too. Not just how he died, but how he lived, what he believed in. Reynolds met her gaze, then nodded solemnly. I will. 3 days later, Admiral Han Park sat in his new office at Unity Station. The wall screen showed a live feed from the Ardani homeworld. where Chief Counselor Varric stood in their council chamber. "The Galactic Congress has reviewed our recommendation," Varric was saying. "They have agreed to offer humanity provisional membership, effective immediately." Park couldn't hide his surprise. "That's unexpected, Chief Counselor. We thought it would take decades." The Congress was impressed by the speed of human adaptation, Varric explained. "The success of the Kim initiative and the opening of your academy demonstrated unusual capacity for growth." The alien's crystal form shifted, and what Park had learned was a gesture of respect. "There is something else, Admiral. The Congress wishes to name the first human embassy Kim Hall, in honor of the one whose death became the catalyst for this new era." Park felt a wave of emotion. "General Kim would be honored," he said. "As are we all." After the call ended, Park sat alone in his office. He opened his desk drawer and took out an old photo, himself and Tai as young officers, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at some forgotten joke. "You did it, old friend," he said softly. "You got us to the stars after all." Outside his viewport, a new ship was being prepared for its maiden voyage. Its hull gleamed in the light of the distant sun, the name clearly visible. U.S. Ta Kim. It would be the first human vessel to travel beyond the solar system using Ardani hyperspace technology. Its mission: to represent Earth at the Galactic Congress, carrying the hopes of a planet that had looked at its own darkness and chosen to reach for the light instead. As Park watched the ship, he remembered something Tai had once told him. "The stars remind us how small we are, and how vast our potential to grow beyond ourselves." Tai Kim had been right. One tragic death had rippled outward, changing not just Earth but humanity's place in the galaxy. From mankind's darkest moment had come its brightest future, the ripple effect of a single life. And death had reached the stars.